The days are getting shorter, the weather's getting colder, but what does that mean for your hot rods and race cars? It means we gotta take some special precautions to make sure that we keep our classic cars safe for the winter. This El Camino sees a lot of track time, and as such, I'm governed by the NHRA rules of the cooling system. I can only either have straight water or an NHRA accepted coolant. Water is cheap, the waterless coolant alternatives are not. I run a pretty big cooling system on this, so it's a little cost prohibitive to go after those waterless coolants that are available. I run straight water, but Eric, isn't that bad for your engine and corrosion and stuff? Short answer is yes, because a lot of the additives are not NHRA approved and can actually cause problems. So let's first answer a question. Why does the NHRA not want to see traditional antifreeze and propylene glycol-based coolants in cars? The answer is in the event of parts breakage and catastrophic engine failure, rapid disassembly, it's going to dump coolant all over the track. Propylene glycol gets into the rubber and is extremely hard and time-consuming to clean up afterwards. So it's easier to just clean up water or the waterless coolants that can just be essentially torched out of the surface. So my El Camino is running straight water. That means I got to take it out before it freezes, and my choices are either leave the cooling system dry, so there's nothing there to freeze, or add antifreeze. Well, antifreeze is getting a little bit expensive if you've looked at the price of it compared to what it was 15, 20 years ago. It's significantly more money. So I'm just going to drain the cooling system out of this to get it prepared for winter. Now, before I go any further, I have the NHRA 2024 rulebook. Yes, I realize it's the end of 2024 as I'm recording this, but it still stands. I searched for coolant inside the rulebook and did not find any specific callouts about NHRA allowing or not allowing any form of coolant. However, Evans waterless coolant has a letter from the NHRA that allows it to be used. Now, Evans is like $52 a gallon, and from what I understand and what I can read in its technical specifications, it does offer freeze protection. Now, there's a lot of tracks that operate under the NHRA, IHRA, whatever sanctioning body, or even some of the outlaws that don't have a sanctioning body. They will say no glycol-based coolants. What that means is that there's glycol free alternatives. VP has them. There's a whole myriad of them out there. So I'm going to look into that more come springtime when I get this thing ready to rock. The VP Stay Frosty that I'm reading about is water-based, biodegradable, which probably means it's easier to clean up, glycol-free, and offers a freeze protection down to 0 degrees F. 0 F is perfectly fine in most cases where I'm at. Last winter I had a handful of negative 14 degree days, which makes me question having it in the hot rod here come some of these winter times that are exceedingly cold. So I'm going to do a little bit more research on that later, but for the short term, I got to get this water out of it before it hits a hard freeze tonight. Now, I've built a semi-lower engine containment device. This is more of an all-purpose drip catcher because as much as I'd like to think it's the case, my transmission and engine do weep a little bit of fluid. So while I'm watching the coolant drain over there, I've just undone the pipe plugs on the bottom side of the block and they're draining for a few minutes. I want to address the subject of electrolysis. Basically, static charges go back and forth and they can attack the softer metals of the aluminum versus the cast iron, dissimilar metals. It happens. My engine is pretty well grounded, which helps, but it's not a perfect cure. I have a radiator cap, this little guy, that has a thing called a sacrificial anode on the end. What that means is that in the event that there is any electrolysis going on inside the engine and such, it's going to attack the sacrificial anode first and consume that before it goes after the more precious metals of the cylinder heads and so forth. So this guy's in pretty good shape. I'll post a link to this in the description. They're actually a little hard to find, and for a few years they weren't making them. So yeah, this is fun. So something I'd like to know with all those options out there, which ones are typically track accepted? Which ones are the ones that make the most sense? I mean, the Evans waterless coolant sure is nice, but at the price tag of like $52 a gallon, I mean, that's a big cooling system. That's going to take a lot to fill. Right now, the VP stuff kind of has my eye, but I'm going to do a little bit more research on it, and I promise to bring this to you guys come springtime when it's time to fill this radiator back up. But I want to hear you below. What are the options for safe coolant outside of straight water for track use. Specifically, if it gets by the NHRA, IHRA, any of the other major sanctioning bodies, I want to hear from you guys. Until then, the cooling system's drained and no more threat of freezing for this thing. I don't want to crack a block, lose a radiator, lose something major because I forgot to take the water out of the system. That's just unfun. All right, gearheads, I think I put in more research than any sane person would put in on this. I spent several hours perusing forums, NHRA rulebooks, track websites, everything I could find to try and come up with an answer of what's an acceptable coolant to use on drag strips. Right now, the best answer I have is water. A lot of tracks say don't use water wetters because it does funny stuff. The only other one I can find is the Evans Waterless Coolant. Now, I did mention earlier that I was looking at the VP stuff, but the problem is the price tag that I was seeing for the half gallon was about half the price of a gallon of the Evans. But keep that in mind, now that it's half the size and half the price, it doesn't really get us anywhere in terms of being ahead on the budget or not. So I really don't have an answer. Oh, and further information, the VP stuff, from what I was seeing, it claimed that it would be able to offer some freezing protection down to, at least below freezing. But upon further research, VP's own website makes no claims to be able to offer any freezing protection. So that pretty much just leaves it with the Evans Waterless Coolant. Now, the stuff is about $52-ish a gallon as of the time of recording, but the thing that they're not telling you, well, that you have to do a little bit further research on, is that in order to prep your system, you need to use their system prep, which is almost the same money per gallon, and you have to use the same amount that you would in the cooling system to get your existing system prepped. If it's a dry block, brand new build, brand new components, they're saying that the prep isn't necessary. However, if you've run water, antifreeze, anything in it, you're supposed to flush out the system, drain everything as best you can, and then fill the system up with their prep, which is hydrophobic, meaning it absorbs water. With that water absorption, it then you take it out of the system. So you're removing as much water as possible, you remove the prep, and then your system is supposedly ready for the as delivered Evans Waterless Coolant. Now, I'm not saying that's not an option still, but it certainly means that for some people, you're going to have to save up a couple of bucks to be able to go that road. My quick math, at about 4 gallons, we're over $200 in coolant, and the prep is going to be at least $150 in their prep solvent to be able to make this work. So we're closing in on the $400 mark when water is pretty much free. So I can see the argument why someone would say, just run water, use whatever. And then I actually found that there's some argument with distilled water versus regular water and the electrolysis or the stability of water with or without minerals. So, man, I tell you what, this is a rabbit hole that I didn't expect to dive down, yet I did. So, more to come on this in a future episode, but you know something? In the short term, the car's not going to freeze. I'm not going to spit freeze plugs out. I'm not going to crack blocks or breaks parts. And frankly, that's good enough for now. Thanks for watching. We'll see you later, and we'll get to building stuff real soon.